Clara Hensley warned them, but no one listened. Now, 5 years after she vanished without a trace, the evidence she left behind is exposing a secret far darker than anyone imagined. In the peaceful town of Woodpine, nestled in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, life moved slowly. People knew each other by name, shopkeepers remembered your favorite coffee, and gossip traveled faster than cell reception. It was the kind of town where people trusted their neighbors and locked their doors more out of habit than fear. Her car was still in her driveway, her porch light on. There was no sign of a break-in, no fingerprints that didn't belong, and no evidence she had left voluntarily. One mentioned lights seen flickering deep in the woods at precisely 3:17 a.m. on 3 consecutive nights, and later told her he saw something buried near the abandoned quarry. The vehicle she described had been flagged in an unrelated investigation 2 years prior. A missing persons report had been filed on Jack Turner, but closed due to lack of evidence. Clara's observations, while alarming, began to line up with real events. And most disturbing of all, her final letter wasn't stored with the rest. It had been mailed. Jack vanished weeks later, and most assumed he'd left town. Clara thought differently. She believed he had been silenced. Several letters referred to underground tunnels that stretched beneath the outskirts of Woodpine. Left over from the 1920s bootlegging era, Clara claimed these tunnels were being used again, but not for smuggling alcohol. Another detailed a vehicle-an old black pickup. No plates that had been parked near the riverbank for hours without a driver. Clara had recorded dates, times, and even partial license plates. She referred to a group she called the Keepers, claiming they held secret meetings and that people who got too close went missing or left town without notice. Her phone was found on her nightstand, untouched, but it was in her bedroom closet that officers discovered something unexpected. Behind a row of hanging sweaters was a loose wooden panel. Behind it, a metal box. Inside were dozens of carefully arranged letters, each one typed, printed, and dated. These weren't random thoughts or ramblings. They were structured accounts, methodical records of something she believed was happening right under the town's nose. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual. When police entered her home, they found it undisturbed. The door was locked from the inside. A kettle sat on the stove. Its water boiled down to nothing. Her wallet, keys, and jacket were all in place. But Clara was gone. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. She had simply vanished, and the town of Woodpine would never be the same. That's why Clara Hensley stood out, even though she tried her best not to. At 27, Clara lived a life of near invisibility. She worked part-time at the Woodpine Library, arriving before the doors opened and leaving just as they closed. She rarely spoke, unless spoken to, and never joined community events, holiday fairs, or Sunday service. Children whispered that she was strange, some even calling her a witch in hushed tones, though nothing about her appearance supported it. She wore soft sweaters, kept her light brown hair tied back, and always carried a worn leather bag filled with books and notebooks. Clara lived in an old cottage on the edge of town that had once belonged to her grandmother. It was surrounded by tangled hedges and shaded by overgrown oak trees. Few people had ever been inside. When delivery drivers brought packages, they left them at the gate. Over time, Clara became part of the background, noticed, but not questioned. But if anyone had taken a closer look, they might have noticed the subtle signs of someone who was watching and waiting. Clara always sat near the security monitors at the library. She walked home by different routes each day. Most importantly, she wrote. Late into the night, her windows flickered with dim lamplight as she filled page after page of lined notebooks, her handwriting small and tight. What Clara was writing would not become known until after she disappeared. But the warnings were there all along. She had submitted multiple anonymous tips to the Woodpine Police Department over the course of 3 years. At first, they came by email. Short messages describing suspicious figures entering the forest, cars with covered plates parked by the old timber mill, and distant chanting heard in the early morning hours. Officers investigated once or twice but found nothing. As time went on, Clara's tone changed. She stopped sending emails and began typing letters, always unsigned, always sealed in plain envelopes and left in the department's mailbox at odd hours. The letters became more detailed, describing an underground network, secret gatherings, and a place she called the Vault. Her final letter ended with a chilling sentence: "They know I'm watching. If I disappear, Look beneath the trees. On a cold, rainy Monday, Clara Hensley vanished. When investigators began to unravel the mystery behind Clara Hensley's disappearance, they had little to work with. Each letter described encounters, patterns, and strange events. She described the disappearance of a local handyman named Jack Turner, a man who had once done repairs at her cottage. At first, detectives thought the letters were delusions, but then they began to cross-check her details. The vehicle she described had been flagged in an unrelated investigation 2 years prior. A missing persons report had been filed on Jack Turner, but closed due to lack of evidence. Clara's observations, while alarming, began to line up with real events. There were no properties by that name, no locations officially recorded, but Clara had capitalized it every time, as if it were a proper noun, a place, not a thing. That letter changed the direction of the investigation. No longer was Clara seen as a missing woman. Beneath it, a metal staircase descended into complete darkness. Once opened, it revealed a small windowless room. In the corner sat a wooden crate. Inside was a dusty box containing various personal items, a set of keys, a torn book, and a bundle of photographs. Most of the photos were unremarkable. Forest clearings, blurry shots of vehicles, and the outside of buildings in town. But one photo was different. The air was damp and heavy, laced with the scent of mold and rust. State investigators took over, and soon after, federal agents joined the inquiry. The property was registered to a shell corporation, one that had been formed just 2 years before Clara disappeared. That corporation was linked to others, all tied together in a confusing web of financial documents and offshore addresses. But eventually, the trail pointed back to people within Woodpine itself, individuals with power. The current mayor, a respected business leader, and even the retired police chief had some connection to the holding companies managing the forest land. It was a deeply uncomfortable revelation for a town that prided itself on unity and transparency. What began as a missing person case had now shifted into a larger, far more complex investigation. The tunnels beneath the forest were mapped and revealed a vast network of interconnecting paths, many of which led to sealed rooms, hidden exits, and rusted doors that hadn't been opened in decades. Most alarming was that some of these tunnels extended beneath private properties, raising red flags about who might have known of their existence and use. At the bottom, they found themselves in a narrow brick corridor. The walls were old, clearly remnants of Prohibition-era tunnels, just as Clara had described. The deeper the team went, the more unsettling it became. Wires snaked along the ceiling, suggesting someone had installed lighting, but the bulbs were all shattered. Food wrappers and discarded cans littered the floor, some with expiration dates only months old. Someone had been down there recently. She became a potential whistleblower. Suddenly her disappearance looked far less random. And most disturbing of all, her final letter wasn't stored with the rest. It had been mailed. She looked older, her hair longer, her face thinner, but it was unmistakably her who had taken the photo. Why had it been hidden in the tunnels, and what had happened after that date? No trace of her was found beyond that one haunting photograph, a silent message that she had once been there, watching, waiting. The photo sparked renewed interest in the case, prompting state investigators to get involved. A map of the tunnels was commissioned, and more entrances were searched for. Officials began interviewing those who had lived near the forest, hoping someone had seen or heard something. She was holding a sheet of paper with a handwritten date, October 9th, 2020. The photo was taken 3 years after she disappeared. It's postmarked just 2 days before she vanished. The letter arrived at the Woodpine Police Department in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. The words were typed in her familiar font. "They think I won't talk, but I already have." Everything is written down. The missing posters faded from storefronts. Her cottage was sold to a young couple from out of town, and most people in Woodpine moved on. But the police never officially closed the case. There were too many loose threads, too many unanswered questions. Occasionally, a new officer would take an interest, combing through the boxes of documents and evidence, but nothing ever led anywhere until the fall of 2022. If I go missing, they're responsible. I've seen the vault. I know what's inside. The vault. The same word that had appeared over and over in her notes. Detectives had no idea what it referred to. 5 years passed, and Clara Hensley's case quietly slipped from public attention. A hiker named Daniel Price was exploring the forest near the outskirts of town, an area few locals visited anymore. He was off the main trail when his dog began barking near a mound of overgrown brush. Curious, Daniel pulled back the tangled vines and discovered a rusted metal hatch. It was flat, embedded into the earth, with a circular handle in the center. He tried to open it but couldn't, so he took photos and reported it to the authorities. Within 2 days, a team arrived. They cleared the area and managed to break the hatch open. At the end of the passage, they found a locked steel door. It was a Polaroid of Clara Hensley. Discovery sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Not only did it prove Clara had been alive long after the case went cold, but it also raised more questions. And yet, despite all the renewed attention, Clara herself remained missing. The photograph of Clara Hensley sparked more than just renewed interest. It reopened the case entirely. When investigators traced the land ownership records of the area surrounding the hidden hatch, they hit a dead end. The property was registered to a shell corporation, one that had been formed just 2 years before Clara disappeared. That corporation was linked to others, all tied together in a confusing web of financial documents and offshore addresses. Her letters had named names that now appeared in real estate and tax documents. Inside, a flash drive was wrapped in plastic and taped beneath a floorboard. The data on it was encrypted, but tech specialists were able to retrieve several video files. A journalist investigating the land transactions died in a suspicious house fire. The subject line read simply, "Still watching?" It had no sender information, no message in the body, and just one attachment, a high-resolution image. The image was of Clara Hensley, standing in front of a television screen displaying a news segment about her own disappearance. Her face appeared older, worn, but focused. Or was she still in danger, trying to leave signs for investigators? As law enforcement tried to make sense of it all, more strange activity began to surface. After 2 days of digging, they found something sealed beneath thick concrete, a metal vault door secured with heavy chains. Behind it, a chamber lined with old stone, smelling of decay and wet earth, held personal belongings, purses, shoes, wallets, all tagged and arranged as if catalogued. A makeshift ledger listed dates and names, most of whom were declared missing over the past 15 years. A second hidden entrance to the tunnels was discovered beneath an abandoned church, long closed due to fire damage from a decade earlier. Inside were charred remains of old chairs and scattered documents, burned fragments of what looked like meeting logs, names, and dates. Yet the deeper they looked, the more it felt like Clara had known all along. They were chasing a ghost who may still be one step ahead. Whether Clara was alive and watching, or long gone, and her legacy still unraveling, one truth remained. She had warned them. And then she vanished. That she had spent years trying to warn people, collecting evidence, and documenting it for the day she'd be gone. She stared directly into the camera, expression calm and unreadable. She was alive. 2 former town employees who had been scheduled to testify abruptly left town. Whispers of a cover-up echoed louder than ever. As the deeper authorities dug, the clearer it became someone or something was still watching. Most were grainy, dark footage of wooded areas, zoomed in on license plates or faces that appeared only briefly. But one file stood out. Titled Vault Entry, it showed Clara herself, holding a flashlight and whispering the date. September 12, 2020, forensic analysts couldn't trace the IP address it was sent from. There were no fingerprints on the device used to send it. And no security footage from nearby postal offices or internet in the region showed anything unusual. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to cover their tracks. One of the properties above the tunnels, a crumbling warehouse on the outskirts, was owned by a limited partnership that received monthly deposits from anonymous sources. It was unclear who was filming, possibly Clara herself, but the footage ended abruptly. The screen going black, just as a loud metallic clank echoed in the background. A former groundskeeper, now elderly and suffering from dementia, came forward after seeing a segment on the news. He told agents that years ago, he was paid in cash to maintain a property deep in the woods, keep it cleared, tend the fence, and never ask questions. When pressed for details, he mentioned a hatch and a small stone building nearby that he was told never to enter. The location matched the original hatch where Clara's photograph had been found. It was the last known recording of her. More chilling than anything was the realization that the video had never been shared, never posted, never reported. Clara had hidden it, possibly fearing it would never reach the right people. Investigators grew more certain that Clara had discovered something bigger than anyone had realized, and someone or several people had gone to great lengths to hide it. But eventually, the trail pointed back to people within Woodpine itself, individuals with power. The current mayor, a respected business leader, and even the retired police chief had some connection to the holding companies managing the forest land. It was a deeply uncomfortable revelation for a town that prided itself on unity and transparency. The documents suggested that Clara's so-called keepers were not just figments of her imagination. Then, another breakthrough occurred. During a forensic sweep of Clara's old home, a hidden compartment was discovered behind a bookshelf in the study. The video cut to a shaky shot of her entering one of the tunnels. The evidence mounted, but the silence around it grew heavier. Weeks after the flash drive was uncovered, a strange email arrived in the inbox of one of the lead federal investigators. The photo's metadata showed it was taken only a week prior. Speculation spread fast. Had Clara escaped from whatever group she had uncovered? Had she staged her disappearance from the beginning to dismantle them from within? Then came the final clue, one so haunting it brought the investigation full circle. Authorities returned to that site, this time bringing cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. But Clara's name wasn't there. The chamber was clearly part of something organized, deliberate, and long-running. Now, with the email photo, the investigators weren't just chasing a mystery.